All right. Put this thing back up there. Okay, so back into this, right into it. We're going to be talking about zone number 1 right now. Thanks for sticking around. Nobody ran out. I looked like about the same number of people, so that's good. That's good. All right, here's where we are at 8 o'clock. Totally wrong. So we'll just skip it completely, so I don't have to be convicted by the agenda that I wrote into the slides. All right, Psalm chapter 127, verse 1. Psalm chapter 127, verse 1, the Bible says, "Except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it. Except the Lord keep the city, the watchman waketh but in vain." Because there's a lot of things that are vying for your attention. There's a lot of things, a lot of influences out there in the world vying for your heart. And we know that as a man, or as he thinketh in his heart, literally the Bible says, so is he. So we want to be thinking about the right things, because that's a good thing. You know what that means? That means that should give you a lot of hope. You know, as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. What if the things that you were thinking about were godly things all the time? What if the thoughts you thought in that self-reinforcing stronghold wasn't a self-reinforcing stronghold, it was self-reinforcing godliness, and you were thinking about godly things all the time, and all those godly thoughts gave you godly feelings, and that made you have godly actions, which made godly habits, and you lived a godly lifestyle.
That's good.
Godly lifestyle.
Amen.
Amen. That's a good thing. That's a good thing. These things can be good. These things can be bad. These things can be bad. Now, we're talking about putting on this armor for your family piece by piece. The first thing we're going to look at is devices. These are things such as phones, computers, laptops, tablets. That's where we are right now, zone number 1. Zone number 2, network. Those are the things in your home. A lot of people have a little Wi-Fi router. We're going to talk about that. I've got one right here. This is the cheapest one literally Walmart had the night when I was in emergency buying one. It cost about 30 bucks. It's a piece of junk. But a lot of people have something just like that. Sometimes it has antennas, you know. Sometimes it looks like a space alien. Sometimes it looks like it's going to hurt you. Man, I've seen some. I mean, those things look dangerous. I wouldn't want to fall on one of those things. You might die. At least put out an eye. All right, there's also the internet. That's the stuff outside your home. And then physical. And we'll get to each one of these zones in their turn. Now first we're going to stick right here with the devices. I call this the first to fight. This is your primary level of defense. This is the first thing about. I've got really 2 things that I'm going to focus on tonight. You need to have something on your devices at the very, very minimum, and there are free ways to do that. I didn't say 3, I said free, as in without cost, or not really. It did cost somebody something. They actually spent time to develop it. And then one of these things. We'll talk about this later in the network level. I'm nobody's salesman. I don't have anything to sell. But this is a circle. We'll talk about this tomorrow morning. It's one of my favorite devices right now for the purpose of protecting my family. This was something here at the device level. This is in the network level, but something at the device level, something at the network level. That's a good, as I said, belt and suspenders. Brother Carter said, Joe, you need to stop saying belt and suspenders. You need to say, give no occasion to the flesh. And I think he's right, because it's the exact same thing. It's just 2 layers of defense where we give no occasion to the flesh.
Amen.
So that's what we're going to talk about tomorrow morning. Tonight, though, we're talking about devices. Now, there's a vulnerability here, is that there are many types, as we discovered. iPhone, iOS, Android. I mean, how many different types of iOS? There's iPods, there's Apple Watches, there's iPhones, there's iPads. There's lots of different devices in just Apple's mobile economy. There's, of course, Android tablets. There's Windows phones and Windows tablets. I have one right here. It's not exactly the same thing as the Windows phone. It's a little bit different programs, but it's essentially the exact same kernel that's used in Windows 10 as what's on the Windows phone. So there's lots of different devices out there. What makes this so different or difficult in that there's lots of different devices out there. So it's hard to, with a good mix of devices, pretty soon things become kind of complex because you're doing things different ways. There's also constant changes. I mean, Apple is very pleased to have you come to their store and pay them $700 each year to get another upgrade. Makes them tickled pink. If I were Apple, I would want you to come and buy a new iPhone every year. That would be great. But there's a lot of change. A lot of people do it. Not only that, even in the world of Android, there are so many different devices and so many different front ends for Android. Just that in and of itself, you can have two Android phones that are actually running Android at the very root level, and they look and work completely differently because of the way they built a front end on the front of it. So there's all kinds of different variations of the kind. There's also a bit of a knowledge gap. A brother just approached me just a few minutes ago and mentioned, hey, you know, sometimes these kids move around really fast on these things. There is a knowledge gap. Sometimes you just don't know what's going on. The kids can do it, and you maybe an older parent or an older grandparent doesn't know that much about it. And that's fine, but I'm talking about even someone like myself who stays up with things fairly well. There's a lot of things that just because it's brand new, I don't know anything about that. You know, I don't really know that much about Macintosh. I've never owned one. I'd like to have one, but that maybe one day. But I just don't know that much about them. I mean, I can use one basically, but I have to look on internet articles. Somebody says, I need this fixed, or I need you to do, we're going to try to make this, we're trying to record the audio from the church sermons at church onto the Mac. And so I had to do a little bit of research. I'd bring up a web page and I'd say, okay, how do you do this? Okay, I'll go do it. And how do you do this? And I'll do it. That's because I don't know. There's a knowledge gap there. I can't be an expert on everything, and neither can you. And I'm not trying to train you in developing a huge expertise on every aspect of technology. It's impossible. It's impossible. I specialize in cybersecurity. People say, hey, my Windows is doing this. And I say, wow, that's horrible. I used to be able to do that kind of stuff, but I don't do that anymore. I'm just not that. I mean, I could probably figure it out, but, it's like the doctor. Hey, doctor, it hurts when I do this. Well, don't do that. But sometimes there's just a lot of things that you just don't know. So that's the vulnerabilities that we face. How can that be exploited? Well, unapproved use. Unapproved use. Not just what it's being used for, but just unauthorized access. A kid with a phone or something like that shouldn't have. There are hidden apps. There's a lot of things you can download. There's a lot of apps right now. If you search the internet or the iPhone, iOS app store, there's a lot of apps that look like calculators that are actually hidden picture stores. They look like a calculator, they work like a calculator, but if you type the code word in, it actually opens up, and that's where they keep all the rude pictures. They're out there. Right. You search for them. App, picture safe. I mean, they're out there. So there's a lot of hidden apps out there that provide things. Illicit searches. I mean, sometimes you find things by accident. Sometimes you find things on purpose. Both of those are bad. There's secret communications. There are situations where you don't want your kid talking, or even yourself, or your spouse, or anyone talking to certain individuals. You don't need these secret communications. And that's actually where a lot of the young ladies fall prey to internet dangers, is with communications. Right. This is not just a one-sided thing. This is not all about young men, or men in general. There's some very definite, specific dangers, and we'll go into that, but it's because, hey, let me shock you to death right now. All right, you ready? Everybody ready for this? Men and women are different from the other, one from the other. Shocker, I know. Stick with me. It'll all be okay. But no, seriously, there's different. And the things that men have dangers with the eyes, women have dangers with the heart. And it's very biblical. It's very biblical. And I'll explain that to you a little bit later. But there's dangers out there. Secret communications, illicit searches, accidents, all those things are very dangerous and can be easily done, and all happen from one of these. One of these. Now, what do we do about it? Well, we have security controls. We lock down the different tools and things on this. You know, don't let your kid just browse the App Store and download and install anything they want. Period. If you want to make one blanket rule right now, there's settings in your iPhone and on your Android and probably even Windows phones. I don't really know, brother. See, there's my knowledge gap. I don't know, but you cannot. Evan has an iPhone, Kendra has an iPhone even, and she can't install just applications. Well, actually, I think, and they certainly can't uninstall them once they're there. So you don't let them install, you don't let them uninstall, and you don't let them buy in-app purchases. Number one thing, just don't do that. You lock down the tools. You use user account controls. A lot of these operating systems, like in Windows or in Macintosh, have account controls where you can lock people out of the administration of the machine. You don't have to just have your computer auto-log in as the most powerful user on the entire system just by default. A lot of people will buy a laptop at Best Buy or whatever. They'll come home, they'll set it up, it says, do you want to use a password? They say, no, I wouldn't want to use a password. Why would I ever want to use a password? And it automatically logs in each time they hit the power button to the administrator account. What does the administrator account have? All power in the world of that computer. So if you install something like NetNanny or Canine Web Protection or MobiSip or anything, guess what can be done? It can also be uninstalled because everybody's using the administrator user. There's a built-in user account management in just about every one of these systems where you can make additional users that are just that, a user, not an administrator, a user. Users can't install and uninstall anything. Users can't start and stop services that are protecting them. There's just simple things like that. Now, I can't teach you how to administrate a Microsoft network, but I can teach you some things about this. Now, there's a time of day. One of my biggest things is time of day. In our house, the internet, the computer access, all shuts off at what time, boys, now? 10? I think they go off at 10. I think the computers go off at more like 8:30 or 9, but anyway. But we use time of days. There's no reason these things should be on all night. No reason at all. And there's different technologies you can use to prevent that from happening. It is a belt and suspenders. It is a layer of defense. It is removing occasion from the flesh. Monitoring, notifications, logging. These are just basic cybersecurity things. Now, 20 years ago, my wife heard Mom and Dad, they had a computer. Kirk and Bonnie King, missionaries to Albania, they had a computer sitting out in their living room. When I first met Karis, their computer was a Packard Bell, wasn't it? Oh, it's a wonderful piece of equipment. Anyway, we used to chat over modems. We had an online romance. ICQ, baby. That's the way it was. Now, but they had a computer sitting out in the living room where everybody could see it. And that's not a bad control. It's keeping it in a public area where, everybody knew where it was, and if anybody was there, they'd know what was going on, right? Well, what's the problem with that? Anybody see a problem with that? Do you leave your phones out in the living room 24 hours a day, 27 days a week? 365 or 366 days a year, depending on if it's leap year? No, you don't. You have also laptops. You also have tablets. You can't just leave things in a public area anymore. It's not a bad security control. The problem is it's an obsolete security control. It just doesn't fit the situation any longer. You can't just say, well, we're going to leave our computer in the living room. Yeah, you can, and that's great. And the boys have 2 computers they do their school on, and they are locked down tighter than the drum, and they're in a public area out there in the loft area. But that's different because I know they can't go anywhere. They can go to like Abeka and Alpha and Omega right now. That's the only 2 places they can go, and maybe 1 or 2 other places. That's it. And only during certain times of the day, and there's 3 layers of protection on them, actually 4, now that I think about it. 4 layers of protection on them because I don't take any chances with these things. But that's very rare. Can you say, I'm just going to leave these things in the living room? Most of the time you have something that travels around. Therefore, the security controls that you're going to put on these devices must travel with the devices. You're going to hear me say that several times. That is a key thought. A security control at the device level must travel with the device. It is no good if it only works at home. It is no good if it only works in a public area. It's got to go with it. And you're saying, Brother Joe, get with it. Don't just go with it. All right, here we go. Well, why is that? Well, public areas, that was great. But sometimes security controls fail. That's why we're talking about defense in depth. We're going to pick up the slack when something fails. We're also going to talk about passwords. That's going to be in the internet zone. I have some technologies there that can help you with that, because passwords need to be changed and different. Computers, Microsoft Windows, Windows phones, Windows tablets. Once upon a time, you could upgrade from Windows 8.1 or Windows 7 to Windows 10. It was free. It still is. You just have to promise Microsoft that at some point in the future, you will use the accessibility feature. So if you can make that promise, you can still get a free upgrade to Windows 10. If you can upgrade to Windows 10, particularly if you have Windows 8, please do. You'll thank yourself later. Windows 8 was atrocious. Windows 7 may not be as bad. I like Windows 7. I use it professionally all the time. Windows 7 is a good system. Both of them have built-in security controls. Both of them have account management. Now, I can't teach you exactly how to do everything right here, but in a Windows 10, you drop down here to this little, here, let me not confuse everybody with the rest of the screens. I don't know if you can see this, but I've gone down here towards the clock, and there is this little message box thing, the Action Center. You go here, you go to All Settings, which brings up this, and there is a thing called Accounts. Hey, there's my smiling face. How you doing? All right, so if I wanted to add a family member, and Microsoft has some really good family features here on Windows 10. A lot of people use family because most people use Windows. So a lot of people use Windows because it's cheap. You can go and buy a laptop at Walmart or Best Buy or whatever and get Windows. A lot of people don't really think that much about it. They can't afford a Mac, so they buy a Windows machine. Here you go. Well, in our world, in the world of my family, we have many of my on there. People with this other people box here, and I can say add someone else to this PC, and it can make me wait for just a moment. Really, it's just a second. It asks me for some things like that. And there's ways that you can get around where you don't necessarily have, you can just create a basic account on here. And what I'm doing is saying, I want to create another account, but I don't want them to be the administrator of this PC where they could uninstall or install something. I want them just to be a basic user. Add a user without a Microsoft account. I can put the name in, I can put the password in, or whatever, and then I could have a young person who does not have an email address list. You see, Bob. Bob is a local account. If I wanted to change his account type, can everybody see that okay? Or kind of see what I'm doing, a little bit what I'm doing? You'll see that there is the possibility of making Bob either an administrator or a standard user. Praise the Lord, Microsoft decided to finally do things and say they're only going to be created as standard users and not make things too complex here. So if you create a local account, take advantage of it. There's articles all over the internet. I've got one on my website. I'll put more up there as I find time. And I mean, there's about 10 or 12 up there now. I'm writing more as I get around to it. But there's articles on how do I create a user. Just do a simple Google search, follow the recipe, and you can do it. It's not that hard. And what happens is you can give the young person their own account. That way they can't get in there and uninstall the protections that you're going to install. If you do create with a Microsoft account, that's fine. You can use an alias of your own email address or whatever. They don't even have to know about the email address just to get into the Microsoft world. If you do that, then there's all kinds of other things that could happen. I can manage my family settings online. This comes with Windows. This is a part of the Microsoft world. Macintosh, Apple also has something somewhat like this, We'll wait just a second while it figures out what it's doing here. Oh. Come on, Net Nanny. You can do it. There we go. It's in here. It should be, because there's nowhere to go. All right, so, but I can see all my kids here. I can see, it gives me a little report. It gives me a little content filtering, like, protecting websites and things like that. You can whitelist and stuff like that under web browsing. But really, here's the power of what you can do here. I use other things for content filtering. What I really use this for is I can turn it on to block inappropriate apps and games, built right into the Microsoft world. I can control screen time. And yeah, okay, so, and by the way, I know I'm going through this pretty quick of the feature on Sunday for 8 regions. So an allowance is I can say, you can be online from between the hours of 8 and 8, but you only have 2 hours of allowance. When it comes to this time, it'll give you a little warning, right, guys? It says, 15 minutes left, save your work. They hate it when that happens, but 15 minutes left. And they save their work, and it's like, oh, my computer locked. Yeah, it sure did. Can I have some more time? Nope. That's the kind of dad I am. But anyway, so it's all right there. And but those tools are available. Like I said, there's a lot of really deep tools there that you can get into and use. So, but that's the things we can use for the current slides. All right. And that's in Windows. A lot of built-in stuff. Time of day, again, that's very, very important. There's a bunch of different technologies that I use. Right now, I recommend Net Nanny for the device level. Net Nanny. Yes, it sounds silly. There are other ones out there. Canine Web Protection is free. You send them, they've got a little sign-up sheet. You can ask for a free license, as many as you want for home use, and they will send you. And it's just an application. You install it on your computers, and you can use it to whitelist. Did I tell you what whitelisting means? Okay, time out. Whitelisting means I'm going to turn off everything except for this one thing, or these two things. Whitelisting means I'm going to turn off all websites except for a Becca Academy. That's a whitelist. It means I'm allowing one or two things, or the ones that I want. Then there's blacklisting. Blacklisting is I've got a list from somewhere of all the bad websites, and you can go anywhere you want to. It's free range as long as you're not pulling on one of these things on the blacklist. That's the difference between whitelisting and blacklisting. Antivirus, antivirus that everybody used to run, people don't really run it as much anymore because it's just not as necessary. Windows has one built in. Macintosh rarely gets viruses, sometimes still does. But, that's a blacklisting technology. They download definitions, and if a piece of software matches a particular definition, it kills it because it hit the blacklist. There's also things we use in the industrial world. I work for the electrical sector that's called whitelisting technologies. I mean, you can only run these applications. You leave it on in learning mode, and you say, I want to use these 3 pieces of software and nothing else. And it takes a hash of those 3 pieces of software, so it knows them to the nth degree. And if anything else tries to run besides those things, it says, kills it. So there's things like that, but the idea is the whitelist or the blacklist. You can use Canine for whitelisting. You can use one that I'm a pretty big fan of called MobiSip. It's fairly cheap. Most of these are MobiSip is a good one. For me, I didn't like the interface as well, and they're a little bit smaller company. The recognized leader in web content filtering for PCs and devices is Net Nanny. They really are. I'll show you the interface in just a second. They've got the most money behind them. They're the most actively developed. They've got a really good license structure. They've got an excellent interface. I can do things with Net Nanny and creating groups and different custom categories that I could not do with MobiSip. It's also very hard to defeat. You can't, kill the Net Nanny service by accident, and go around it. It's very difficult to get around it. You couldn't really get around MobiSip or Canine either. Here's the difference between K9, which I said is free, Blue Coat K9, very good technology. We used it for years. It's a good thing. If you don't have any money to throw at this, get that. But you have to individually control. So like with my family, I've got a whole bunch of computers. So if I wanted to make a change and say, all right, now we're using Alpha and Omega or Monarch for math, now I got to go around to each of the computers and add them. One over here, over here, over here, over here. Oh, I need to add this other website. Now over here, over here, over here. The difference between K9, which I says is free, but you have to do things individually, on MobiSip, and to an even greater degree, NetNanny, I go to their website, I do things once, and those filter profiles go out to all the devices that I have them assigned to. So it's really great. I can do it from work. You know, if Alpha and Omega decides to change the domain that they're hosting their images on, which oftentimes are different domains, the boys, hey, this isn't working. Okay, well, I get on there, I look at the logs, what's it breaking on? Okay, new website. I add that website to the whitelist, and boom, it works. So I can do it from work. I can do it anywhere I can get to an access to the computer, but I do it once, and it goes down to all the devices. That's a huge benefit. So what have we talked about so far? We've talked about the individual controls that are built into Windows. They're good, but they're not completely trustworthy. I wouldn't want to hang my hat on it. It's a good additional layer of protection, but it is not specific to the content protection that from bad websites. Those are Macintosh, and you can controls is what Microsoft turn them on. It's built in, just trustworthy. Anybody have any questions about that? So, sir. Protection is good, but it's computers only. Matter of fact, it's pretty much Windows only. I think they have a version for things mean face here in a second. Against pornography, everything, and this guy, the worst websites imaginable. I mean, just tons of them. And you know, me and the other network engineer, we got this call. It's always this call. It's like, hey, can you run a report on such and such? And we knew that somebody was about to get fired, and they were just adding some more evidence onto the stack to fire somebody when they asked us for the internet report. They were hoping to find something to, you know, clinch the deal because they wanted to fire him anyway. Well, this guy's like, hey, this guy, I saw this on the report. Is this right? This supervisor, here's a good guy, good supervisor. And he was a good guy, and he was saying, we found this on this man's report. Is this right? And we looked at him, we're like, yeah, that looks like this is correct. He's like, this guy's a good guy. This is a Christian man. This was in Monette, Missouri. I mean, back in the small town, this manufacturing. This guy's a Christian man. He says, I've got to fire. You know, this is a terminating offense. This is a termination with cause offense. I mean, are you sure? And we're like, yeah, that's what the logs say. He's like, oh, man, I don't know. And so we got to looking. He hangs up the phone. He's starting to talk to HR to fire this engineer. And we got into the logs a little deeper, and the other engineer and myself started going through them by hand because we didn't want to see this guy get fired. We didn't even know the guy. There's 1,000 engineers that worked in that building. We didn't know him from Adam. But we were worried about it. It's like, something's wrong here. And so we looked through, and it turns out that we weren't displaying in our reports the time of day. And all of these reports were showing really bad behavior at 2 o'clock in the morning. You know what was happening? The security guard had found an unlocked computer and was browsing the internet late at night when this guy was at home in bed with his wife. He almost got fired because our reports weren't very detailed. I'm just telling you, reporting is an important tool, but you need to know the full details. Just because you think you see something doesn't mean you need to verify. You need to look through it. Don't overreact to it, because you'll see things, and you'll see a lot of things. I mean, I see reports all the time. It's like, you know, this site was blocked. And what it is, it's, you know, some kind of, you know, in the way NetNanny works, Amazon will actually show up as a site that has inappropriate material on it. Because you know what? Amazon has inappropriate products on it. And so in NetNanny, if you look at our interface, you will see inappropriate content. Oh, my session has expired. That's good. That means it's protecting me. You don't want it to stay logged in. Don't let your computer stay logged in. Let it time out. It's okay. You can put your password in again. That's a good thing. But like, car gurus, we're looking for a car. You can see these things in here. But you can see, and the thing about NetNanny too is it actually has this feature called masking. So on a web page that you do allow it to pull up, it will mask out cuss words. That's a bonus feature that nobody else has. I don't want to read that junk. So, all right, so this is a very basic, you can kind of see our family picture there. I uploaded that. They don't actually know what my family looks like. I put that there. So there's in the general for the whole house, for my family, I have this generic or this general top level whitelist and blacklist. I can say never allow this website and always allow this website right here from this page at the very general basic family level. So I don't really use that one here, but changes and stuff, beauty of the way NetNanny works that I love. It's the ability to create a custom category. And I know it's hard to see, and I apologize for that. Here, I can maybe blow it up a little bit. Is that maybe a little bit better? All right, so under custom categories, I have all these little things along the bottom, these little blocks. Those are categories I created. I created one called Boys Allowed. That's Evan and Titus, essentially. That's for their school PCs. I have a category called Family Allowed. That's just the whole family. Anybody in the system, these are sites that are always allowed. I have Family Blocked. I'll show you that one in a second. I have Intel Study because Titus is used. What is that you use that required Intel? I know it's a book, but what was it? What was the name of the subject, son? Algebra. He has an algebra book that used this Intel Reader. We couldn't figure out that for a little bit, and I had to create a category for Intel Reader. And I had to do it in a kind of a creative way because I didn't want to go to the root level because there's other stuff there. I just wanted the reader. So I had to do that kind of custom. Monarch, because that's what they're using for school right now. Typesy, which is their typing tutor program that we bought that's teaching because they have to do typing every day. So I had to create a category for that. And I kept all these things separated so I can the category. My family does not need explicit. .itunes.apple.com. That's and radioactivity.itunes, radio services.radio iTunes, streaming audio iTunes, all that junk is the stupid iTunes radio. I couldn't figure out any, quite frankly, to advertise their games. Every game you look at, you look through the iTunes store and all that stuff, it's like, how come all the pictures always have a woman who is improbably drawn standing in front of the ad? My boys don't need to look at that. Amen. I'll lock it out. So, that is a custom category. I could create a new one. You can put a bunch of websites in it and all that stuff. Now, yes, sir.
Now, can you go back to that family block site there?
Sure.
Did you...
It'll get there.
How do you know those were the sites you didn't want?
Okay, good question. Good question. And so after some research and a little bit of trial and error, I found a web page that told me the websites that the computer needed to be. It was basically somebody, how do I open up my firewall to iTunes Radio? They wanted to open it up to iTunes Radio so they could get iTunes Radio. But I used the information that they provided to actually lock it out. So, sometimes you can find that kind of stuff. I had a specific issue, and it was just more towards something that a problem I was looking to solve. So, and what I would like to do, and as we get further along in this little journey, again, I have a website, criticalarmor.com. On that site is a forums, which is basically like a message board. And what I would like to do there is have all of us as church members of various churches be able to work together to help each other find these. Because I don't know everything. But stuff like that, that's kind of hard-won knowledge that I had to go looking for and find. I'd like to be able to provide that to other people. And as other people find these things that I don't know about, that I would have to go and dig out, maybe somebody could post a message like, oh, this is how I fixed this. I'd like to cooperate, I guess, in all this, because there's a lot of stuff that it's hard to find. And like this, that was, and I clicked that, I guess it didn't register, but Like all of those addresses, now Russian and Hungarian. I mean, I knew about the HU and the RU, but you know, like the iTunes stuff, I had to go find that. How to, yes. Well, this actually doesn't do anything. Okay, so yes, they are blocked in the way I use it.
I mean, the way you have them listed there.
Yes.
It looks like you need to tick a little box there, but you don't need to.
Well, if I wanted to delete them or change them or something like that, that's like an edit feature. Yeah, this doesn't block anything. So this is a list. This is the category. I call it the block list just so I know what it means, but I could call it the underwater basket weaving list. It doesn't actually do anything here. I'll show you how to apply it. This just creates the list. And then, okay, so users. Now it's so big I can't remember where I am. Okay, so here's Colin. Hi, Colin. That's Colin's smiling face. He's looking up at me. All right, so if Colin had a device, which his device got stepped on, he had a little knobby tablet, which was a cool little Android thing that was really well protected. It got stepped on and cracked. But when he did have a device, this would be the filter that he would use. So here's the categories that I have blocked. I know it's hard to read, but I'll read them to you. They're alphabetical order. There's a bunch of them. There's like 50 or 60, I think, as much. Abortion, alcohol, anime. Say, if I wanted to do that, I could actually just drop this down here. Actually, that's maybe, this is what I want. I missed. And you can see there's a fourth category in that one, and it's called mask. So that's put little asterisks over the cuss words, so you don't have to read them. I just have it blocked. Tobacco, weapons, suicide, whatever. And here's where every time I create a custom category, it appears here. So in this case, I haven't really set up Colin. Like I said, he doesn't have a device right now. He's just there because I wanted to add everybody to the interface. But like the boys, Evan and Titus's profile, the Boys Allowed website is allowed. So I've created a custom category with a list of websites, and then I go to the individual person inside NetNanny and apply it in a certain way. Does everybody got any questions? You following me on this one? Everybody kind of see how it works? Yes, sir.
So, if I'm reading this correctly, you're blocking everything. NetNanny has their own categories that you then pick and block.
Yep.
You're saying that iTunes gets through that? And
iTunes absolutely gets through that.
That's why you had to create. There's nothing in NetNanny that can block radio.
Okay, yes. Let me go back a little bit. Yes, I can turn off everything. I can whitelist and say nothing gets through, period, except for something I've allowed. But with iTunes, it's kind of weird. I have to allow iTunes to be able to get to the App Store, and there's certain valid things that I want to get to the App Store for. But by getting to the App Store, I was getting these additional domains for the radio. And so what I was doing was I was selectively trying to create something that would allow me to get to the App Store when I allowed it, but always block the radio, which is their streaming audio with all kinds, with who knows what they're going to play next. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So I was sculpting something here for a really specific purpose.
Because it sounded, when you were showing that whitelist you created, it said, wow, there's not much that he's blocking. And then I see what.
Yeah. So this is the application. So like with Colin here, like I said, I didn't spend a lot of time with this, but this is pretty simple. So if I wanted to set up to Colin to be like the boys allowed, I'll turn it on allowed. The internet study allowed, or Intel, excuse me, study allowed. Internet study, we don't want to do that. Family blocked site, let's say Colin's learning how to type, so we're going to allow Type-C. Everything else should be set up just fine. And it's so big, I don't know if there's a save button somewhere. I think it automatically saves. Yeah, okay. So by just turning those on, it automatically saves, and now Colin would be set up like that. So NetNanny, the little engine, would update itself every 5 or 10 minutes, and it would draw these things down. Or I could force it and say, synchronize now. And
All their devices or just their computer?
all the devices. Okay, that's a good question. Let's go into that. So Evan here, he might be a good one to pick on. User settings. What about that picture? All right. Okay, manage devices. There we go. So it knows which devices I have assigned to him. Oh, okay, so it's generic devices. So it's got my iPhone, Kendra's iPad. This is Evan's desktop. Yeah, that's the Z20. And there's Titus's desktop. So it knows who has which devices, so it stores that. So since technically, if I allowed them to, they could log into my tablet, and then I could assign this is running under the Joseph profile. But if I wanted them to log on, I would change the tablet to load into somebody else's profile. So NetNanny is actually multi-user. When I need to work on his computer, I'll go to his computer and I'll either disable NetNanny for 15 minutes or 30 minutes or till the next reboot. I can do that if I'm going to work on it, change something and reboot. I can disable it for a little bit if I have to download something on a website, or I can just log in under my profile, use it, and then I can log off and log him back in. That's a little bit less safe. I prefer to just disable for 15 minutes if I'm going to make a quick change. If I need to go out to a website, download a piece of software, install it, I just disable NetNanny. It requires typing in my very complex password. It disables it for 15 minutes, and 15 minutes it clamps back down, and it's back onto Evan's profile or Titus's or whoever's. So that's the way I get around that, is I let their computers stay under their profile, but NetNanny knows about all the devices that I have. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
So this would be an app or a piece of software that would have to be loaded individually on every single device.
Mm-hmm. And then logged into.
Every phone, every tablet.
Yep.
Every piece needs that piece of software.
Yep. And I have it on my own stuff. Judgment begins at the house of the Lord. I mean, it's, I got to eat my own cooking. It's a poor soup who won't eat his own soup. A poor cook that won't eat his own soup. Any other questions? We're kind of going a little bit long on this one, and I apologize for that. But this is kind of an important subject. This is a real basic level of protection. Seriously, any more questions on this? Anybody got a pot roast burning or anything? Yes?
How does it block things that are linked? Like the things that bother me the most are, for example, I want to send my son an article about NASA's launch.
Right.
Like that. And then what's questionable is that I read the article myself, it's fine, hurt his head, and he's really excited about it. But then there's those strange, weird, sensational things at the bottom.
Yes.
How does it block them? Do they just not show up? Or did it not let me send you that article because they're there?
Well, okay, so part of that is the way the web works. And I don't go to Fox News anymore. I don't use their app, and I don't look at their website, because every other picture down at the bottom, you read the article you want to read, and then there's a bazillion pictures of half-naked women at the bottom. And I'm not trying to be ugly. It's just the way it is. Right. Fox News is like that. If you look at even the Blaze Network and some of the other, semi-conservative sites, they have all these advertisements at the bottom that you can't look at. So I don't go there anymore. But here's how those things work. So if you have, like you said, there's a NASA website there. And what it does is you think of it as one website. But when your computer, this is you, sitting here, when your computer accesses a domain like nasa.com, your computer does this work called this DNS lookup, a domain name server lookup. And what it's doing is saying, you're speaking English, the computer speaks numbers. And it's saying, hey DNS server out there, how do I get to nasa.com? So you type in nasa.com, your browser goes out. It can be other types of stuff, but I'm going to be very basic here. That index file is just a text document that describes the website. And it says, It has like a title section, and it has some content. A lot from website number 1, and another domain over here called website number 2, and another domain over here called website number 3. And so what you're seeing, you put your question. But that's the beauty of something like NetNanny, is if you allowed NASA.com, it does not allow those other websites. And NASA isn't sending you those pictures. NASA's web page is instructing your browser to go out and grab those pictures and those advertisements. So by your browser using NetNanny blocking those websites, they just don't come in. Right. If it's built that way. Now, if there's bad content on NASA.com and you allowed NASA.com, it's not going to stop that. But if it's pulling stuff from other sites, yeah. Mm-hmm. Right. Exactly. I know. I feel your pain. I mean, I'm right there with you. But that's the way it works, and that's part of why this is good, because it does block those other domains. Yeah, sometimes it'll be a broken image or something like that, depending on how it's brought in, you know. And it's not a perfect world. I mean, this is not a panacea. Yes, sir.
So on NASA.com, say it's been great for many years, and they start changing. How do you?
If you've explicitly allowed it with a whitelist, then NetNanny doesn't know anything about it. It's like, okay, you allowed it, you must want it. If you're allowing them to have their filters, and so this is kind of thing, if you're just using the blacklist, and if the website changes, NetNanny has a staff of people that they're paying to monitor those kind of changes, and they build these lists of websites, like those profanity lists and all that stuff you saw in the nudity lists. People are building those lists of domains, and they're trying to keep it up to date as possible. So if you're using the blacklist and NASA starts out good and it starts changing, then it's going to start hitting one of those filters, because they're going to add it to the bad list. But if you're just saying whitelist and you're always going to allow NASA.com, NetNanny doesn't even look at it. It's like, okay, you want it. So it's not hyper intelligent, but it is more intelligent than, you know, it's a protection. No protection is foolproof, but this is a really good protection. So you've got to monitor things, and none of these things are going to be allowed to just work without any monitoring and activity by the parent. Any other questions? Yes, sir.
Familiar with OpenDNS?
Yep, we're going to talk about it.
Okay, just wondering how that compares with that.
Yep, I use OpenDNS. I use like I said, I use 4 things. I use the controls for out of Windows. I use NetNanny. I used to use MobiSip. Before that, I used K9. All 3 of them worked great. That's on the device level. I use the Circle device on the network of my home, and I use OpenDNS on the internet level. Those are the 3 things I'm going to talk about. So you're right there. All right. Back to the presentation and my schedule that I left long, long ago. So we're going to move really fast. All right, cut that out. Work with me, technology. Thank you. Not like that. How about from current slide? Okay. You can do it. I know you can. Oh, it wasn't really intending to show you everything all over again. Okay. Apple devices, Apple OS on Macintoshes, and I'll just go through this. I think we've hit this pretty hard. They have some built-in OS X tools that are user management as well. You can set up restricted users, like just general users. You don't have to be an administrator with advanced. You don't have to be an administrator to use the computer. I know it's convenient. Sometimes you have to sacrifice a little convenience for the safety of your children. Okay? So we gotta keep that in mind. Of course, NetNanny and MobiSip both work on Macs. Chromebooks, the same. MobiSip supposedly works. Like I said, I wasn't able to work it. Google has a whitelisting capability. It's kind of hard to set up, but it's there. If you use a Google Chromebook, you can set up a restricted user, just so you know. Android tablets. Here's a couple of things. Use the built-in Android tools first. If you have a smaller child, somebody under, let's say, what do you think, Titus, 10? under 10. You can use the Google restricted profile. That's basically you can add some game file, you can give it to a small kid, and that's all they can get to. But it is very limiting. So much so that Titus had a tablet before he stepped on it and broke it. That, right? Or no, a chair hit it or something anyway. But we break a lot of tablets apparently. I'm sensing a pattern. But you know, we tried that out first because it was very safe. It was this restricted mode or child profile. And it's great because you could throw like 4 games in there and that's all you have access to. But that was the problem. He saved up his money. He bought this tablet. He was a little bit older. He wanted to use the camera and the things like that on this device and some other things. And I wanted him to be able to because that's why he bought the thing. And it just wasn't working like that. So for a younger kid, that would be great. For a little bit older kid that might need a little bit more access, a little bit more capability. I'm not talking about giving them access to the internet full range. That's not what I'm talking about. I don't think that because my boys have reached their mid-teens that they are becoming more mature in the world of internet security. That's not the case. They might be able to drive a car, but I'm not going to give them unfettered access to the internet. Those are 2 entirely different maturity profiles. I'm going to talk about that later. I can teach a 16-year-old to drive a car, but I cannot trust a 16-year-old to have unfettered access to the internet.
Amen.
No, that's the worst time. I could give a 3-year-old unfettered access to the internet, but not a 16-year-old. 2 different things. 2 entirely different things. But anyway, there's a built-in child profile feature. If you can use it, it's great. I mean, if you've got a young enough kid. But here's the thing. NetNanny works, but in conjunction with NetNanny on an Android device, you also need an app locker. You need to specifically lock out the control panel and the task manager. Why do you have to do that? The task manager is the list of all running programs. If I can get access to the task manager, guess what task I could kill? NetNanny. If I can get to the control panel, I can also uninstall NetNanny. So those are 2 things. You need an app locker in conjunction. There's a bunch of them on Android. Try one out. They change a lot, different versions of the Android operating system. One works better with one works better with the other. I can't give you a specific recommendation, but if you search for app locker, you should find one. Try out a few. Make sure it works. Try to break it. Use it like a kid might. Try to break it. That's what I would do. Can I kill it this way? Can I do this? Can I punch it a bunch of times and make it die? I don't know. Try it a couple of times. Find one that works on your version of the Android operating system that will lock out the task manager and lock out the control panel. Yes, sir. Okay. Yeah, and there was one that I had that I liked a lot. I think it was just called App Lock. It looked like a little Android thing, except it was a lock. But, I found that on a different version of the Android operating system, it simply wouldn't work, and I don't know why. So like I said, but screen time, that sounds like a good recommendation. So screen time, write that one down if you have an Android device. Another thing, all of these things, lock out the App Store. Titus, when he had his tablet before he broke it, he would come to me and say, "Hey, Dad, I'd like to find a game." And so he would sit down right here beside me, and I would unlock the App Store for about 15 minutes, and he could browse around and look at some games. Oh, this one looks fun. And if it was, I would check it out. Okay, we could install it. It had to have my code to install. And I mean, just things like that. I mean, just simple things. There's no reason to have unfettered access to the App Store. So lock out the installation, lock out the task manager, lock out the control panel. Same thing with the Androids. Here's a little video on this. If you want to know how to lock things out on Android, go to the General. Everybody should have this basic control on their Android. Go to Restrictions, Enable Restrictions, put in don't put your birthday in, don't put your anniversary in, come on, your kids know your birthday. Put that in, go in here, you can turn off Safari, you can turn up ratings, all kinds of stuff, but at the very least, even gentlemen ought to turn on the limit adult content on their Safari on. that I trust. My browser, my Safari back on, so I can read a link in an email somebody sent me. But you know what? I want to do that. First of all, because I don't want just the internet coming into my eyes. And second of all, every once in a while, my kid might get a hold of my phone. I'd rather have that browser locked out. I think it's just safe. So, and as a man, I don't want to see that junk. It doesn't do me any good. I don't want it accidentally. Ruins my day. So if you want to see that again, let's see. Go into Settings. Go to General. Go to Restrictions. Every iPhone has this. Enable Restrictions. Put a code in. If you're just doing it for yourself, you can use a code that you know, obviously. Or you could have your wife do it. That might work well too. Go down to Websites and select it, and you can say Limit Adult Content. You also can say Specific Content Only. That's whitelisting. Turn Safari. That's it. What are lockdown tools? You control time of day. Are they tools, habits, or controls? Controls, that is exactly right. I'll use that word, so I'm basically teaching you to understand my crazy moon. Of the following should be considered when policing handheld devices. I didn't get into this, but I should have mentioned this. I've actually got this new policy where when the kids have a phone, only apps that you actually pay for, not the free versions. Why do you say that? Well, because the free ones have advertising. And the first month, 6 months, maybe a year of that application, they're pretty closely monitoring and maybe even advertising for themselves. But as the game gets a little older, they start selling those advertising streams to whoever wants to pay for them. So that's why you see, again, these improbably drawn ladies, quote unquote, standing in front of battle games on these ads that I don't want my kids seeing. So if you can, buy the app. Most of them are 99 cents to a couple of bucks. If you're going to let your kid play a game on a phone, get the paid version. Don't use the free version if you can help it. And if you can't help it and you don't think it's a good risk, then don't get the game. But I really want it. Oh well. Get a job and get your own house and you can have all those games you want, son. Okay, so which of these should be considered only paid apps? I answered that question for you. Actually, all of the above. All right. Can any security control perfectly protect a handheld device? Yes, no, maybe, or it's a secret. I could kill you. I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. No, absolutely not. All right. Very quickly before we go, take your book out. Hope you've been taking some notes. Turn to that last page there, or that last page. Words, not hearers only. Why? Because the Bible says if you're a hearer of the word only, you deceive yourself. So let's make this real and applicable in our lives. That's on page 12. I'm sorry, not 12. Psyched you out. Page 8. What is that one thing you should be doing in your Zone 1 plan? You should count the cost. What's it going to take? Shield the heart. Where's your risk? Guard the mind. What must be removed? Build the castle. What will fill the gap? If you take something away, you got to add something in. Sometimes that's hard to think about. Those are hard answers to come up with. Still important. Let's take just a few minutes or moments. All right. Turn back to the beginning of your book. We're almost done, I promise. Thank you for sticking with me. Nobody was throwing anything at me. I appreciate that. I know I'm way over time. And I apologize for that. Apologize to the preacher for that. But there's a lot of stuff and a lot of good questions. Thanks for that. I appreciate you, everybody, paying attention and contributing. All right, so on this page here that says My Risk Worksheet, this is completely unscientific. It has no basis in any type of study in the real world. This is just me talking to you. But what I'm trying to do with this is make you realize that there are some things that you probably ought to be aware of. And it may surprise you how many things there might exist in your own home. So how do I do this? Well, I think it should be pretty easy. So in the very first box there, it says device, mobile phones. Do you have any? None? Do you just have 2 or less? Or do you have 3 or more in your home? Okay. Desktop computers. Just start ticking those boxes. And then add up those columns. So the first column is weighted 0. This middle column is weighted 1. The last column is weighted 2. So you have a total possible score of 8 in that section. So you could have 0 or you could have 8. Does everybody understand how that kind of works? Even if you do it wrong, that's okay too. Like I said, this isn't exactly scientific. But what I'm hoping you'll see from this is take this home, talk it over with your spouse, think about it, pray about it. There's a lot of stuff here that could be risky, and what I'm trying to point out to you is you may have more than you realize. Right. So, and I have a table at the end. So that's your homework tonight. Take a look at that. Take a look at that Strongholds book. I pray that you'd read that and pray about it. Look up the verses at the end because there's a lot of Bible verses in that little booklet. And so just check it out, read it, and pay attention to it. I pray that it'll be a big help to you. And with that, I think we're finished, brother.
Okay. Great. Thank you. That was excellent. All right. Some very, very helpful tips there. I know that you